Hello, MUS 1002 students. This is the first in a series of videos creating synth patches in VCV Rack. If you have not already, please go to vcvrack.com and get Rack 2. You can just click on Available Now, get Rack 2, and it will scroll down. And again, you only need the free version. We are not going to use any of the paid modules that come in Rack 2 Pro. When you start the Rack for the first time, you'll see this default patch. This is really kind of cool. It sounds pretty nice. But we're not going to use that. So I'm going to select everything with my mouse and hit delete. Now I am going to start creating things by right-clicking. On a Mac, you might want to control-click. This will bring up the full library. I have tons and tons of stuff. I'm pretty heavily into VCV Rack, but I am just going to go down to Brand and VCV, which will show you only the official modules that come with Rack. And that's what we're going to use for this and all the other videos. So the very first thing I need in order to create the most basic synth patch is a MIDI to CV. Then I'm going to zoom in and move things around a little bit so we can see this better. Okay, MIDI to CV is going to be my input. So stuff is going to come from the input, it's going to travel through some other modules, and then it's eventually going to go to the output. So for the output, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select Audio 8. If you are a Windows user, you'll probably want this to be WAS API, and then you'll click on the actual device that you're using. I'm going to have to use ASIO because I'm doing things a little bit more complicated so that everything will route through my hardware interface and then you'll be able to hear what I'm doing. But this is a good start. Okay, so we've got an output. We do need to have some sort of sound input though. So with MIDI to CV, I'm going to click on the top line, and on Windows, if I had a actual device, I would set it to Windows MIDI and then I would choose my device. But here I'm going to do computer, keyboard, and mouse. On a Mac, if I had a physical controller attached, I would do core MIDI, and then again, if I don't, I can select computer, keyboard, and mouse. And it should auto-detect your keyboard. I've got QWERTY keyboard US, and I want to use that. So stuff will go in and stuff will go out, but in between, that is where I've got to do some work. So I'm going to right-click again, and the first thing we need is a VCO, or voltage controlled oscillator. I'm going to click that, and that creates the oscillator. Then I'm going to take the volts per octave from my MIDI to CV, click it over to volts per octave on VCO, and then, just to see if it works, I can connect the sine output to my speakers. It's going to be speaker 1 is left and speaker 2 is right. And in fact it works, so I'm just going to disconnect that. Next, I need some way to make the tone work so that it's not just playing all the time. If I wanted it to play all the time, I'm good here, but I don't. I want it to actually do stuff. So I'll right-click. I'm going to click on the ADSR, which is the envelope generator. I'm going to take the gate output and connect it to the gate input, going from MIDI to CV to ADSR. So this will allow me, when I hit a key on the keyboard, to ramp up As long as I hold that key down, it will then decay and sustain at a sustained level until I release it, and then it will slowly fade out. But in order to use that, I also need a VCA, or voltage-controlled amplifier. I'm going to take the envelope output of my ADSR, connect that up to this unlabeled input on the VCA. Then I'm going to take my sine wave output from VCO and connect it to the input of VCA. You can see that it's lighting up and showing that, in fact, yes, there is data coming through. I've got data coming from sine to in. If I hold down a key, you can see that the gate has gone green on its inlet, and that it's sent data out that we're on the sustain stage of ADSR, and that the LED strips on the VCA have moved to the sustain level. If I release it, they'll drop down, and if I play it again, they'll jump up, go through the decay, go to the sustain, and then release when I take the key off. But we can't hear it, so let's fix that. I'm going to take the output of the VCA and connect it to device 1. Then I want to hear it in both the left and the right speaker, so I'm going to hold down Control, or if I were on a Mac, I would use Command. Click on Out again and drag it to device 2 on audio 8. So now I should be able to hear this in both the left and the right speaker. And that's pretty basic. That is the most basic sound we can get out of a sequencer. I could play around and change the output from sine wave to triangle wave on the VCO. Or saw wave. Or square wave. And with the square wave, I could play around with, say, the pulse modulation. In order to hear the differences of having a low ratio of on to off on the pulse width modulation wave versus a high ratio of on to off, or have 50% where it's dead center. And I can just double click that to move it to the center. I can also play around with the frequency of the VCO. And again, just double clicking on the knob will reset it. If I find my amplifier to be a little too hot, I can grab it and take it down. Or if it's too quiet, I can grab the LED strip and take it all the way up to 100%. But that is it. That is our most basic patch.